focus of this year's federal budget was carefully calibrated to address the cost of living pressures whilst also being mindful not to exacerbate inflation. There were 4 key measures that were handed down within the federal budget. The first one was the cost of living relief. The second one was additional support for Medicare and in fact the care services more broadly. The third one was supporting the transition to cleaner energy, whilst also being mindful of the imperative for economic growth. And the fourth measure is leveraging the anticipated budget surplus to combat the slowdown in economic growth that is heading our way or expected to head our way. The impacts on superannuation from the federal budget were fairly minimal. There was really not too much that was tabled that we didn't already know. A component that we've paid particular attention to is for those individuals who have more than 3 million in their super accounts. Now, the proposal is that for people with more than 3 million, the portion above 3 million will have an additional 15% tax imposed on the earnings. So that's a piece that is still proposed to flow through, albeit from the 1st of July 2025. And we do recognise that we will have a federal election prior to that date. Importantly, the other components also remain unchanged. So for people who have money in pension phase, 0% tax on earnings, 0% tax on capital gains. For those who are in accumulation phase, those tax rates also continue, 15% on earnings and 10% on capital gains for assets that have been held longer than 12 months. This year's federal budget does have some impact on proposed tax changes, albeit the much talked about stage 3 tax cuts was actually silent. So we would expect that we'll hear further information in due course. The other information that did come about around tax cuts was in relation to some increased compliance regulation, and so we would expect that that's being done to protect tax revenue collection. The other measure that was announced was what we would call the instant asset write-off. So for smaller enterprises that have aggregated turnover of 10 million or less, they will be able to write off asset purchases up to 20,000 prior to 30 June 2024. This year's budget does in fact influence our thinking around managing client portfolios. We are walking a tightrope of inflationary pressures and rising interest rate costs, and we do need to be very mindful of this when managing monies. Some of what we're doing at the moment is positioning portfolios more defensively, and by that I'm talking about an increased holding of cash, increased fixed interest and some defensive alternatives. It's also important to mention that alternatives have actually performed quite strongly over the recent past with these particular types of economic conditions. I'd also put to you that some companies can actually perform well in more challenging economic environments, and it's our job as portfolio managers to be seeking these companies out and making sure that we do position client portfolios to take advantage of companies that are performing well in these types of environments.